Look, I'll be honest, when I read the Hunger Games series for the first time when I was 13, I must admit I wasn't too impressed. I liked the first book, thought the second one was almost unnecessary in the way it repeated plot points, and felt ultimately fobbed off by the Peter Gale love triangle, one of my least favourite tropes. So it'll be no surprise to you then that when copies of the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, started showing up in my local supermarket, bookshops were not open, it was the COVID times, I left the copies on the shelves and walked on. However, in the run-up to the second prequel's release, I fell down my latest YouTube rabbit hole, Hunger Games video essays. I watched enough of them to be hit with the burning desire to watch the films, and as a now adult who has since acquired some critical thinking skills, I started to get it. Oftentimes we talk about dystopian media as being this imaginary far-off phenomenon, but when you learn what inspired the Death Games, it kind of confirms what I've been thinking for many years. Our own world is very dystopian. Suzanne Collins was flicking through television in the early 2000s, remarking how jarring it was to be able to change between highly produced reality TV to images of the war in Iraq within just a few seconds. The Hunger Games is really like a midpoint of these two things. A reality TV war competition where people don't just find themselves back in their parents' basements if they lose, they die. It highlights how, to a certain extent, we too are desensitized to violence, like the citizens of the Capitol. They feel good about themselves for sponsoring tributes because giving them food and medicine helps them to survive just that little bit longer. I suppose you can draw parallels to images of starving, thirsty children that we see in the West. The citizens of the Capitol live such comfortable lives that they don't need to worry about people less fortunate than them. It's like their empathy, a quality that is supposed to be human, has become almost synthetic. It's kind of brainwashed out of them. The whole system of oppression in the Hunger Games hinges on people not questioning the status quo, just accepting that things are the way they are no matter their position in society. But the moment somebody does, the moment they start to imagine something different, the whole system comes crashing down. It's also interesting to me how fascinated we are by the concept of a death game. I mean, take the series Squid Game, for example. Very, very popular. Lots of people enjoy that, even though it's not exactly a new premise, you know? Obviously, Squid Game is a bit different to the Hunger Games, but I think you can kind of work out what I'm trying to say. There's also that Doctor Who episode from 2005 where the Doctor and his companion find themselves trapped in a futuristic society where humans can just randomly find themselves thrown into a game station which essentially just produces hundreds of reality TV shows from the 2000s, and if they lose, they die. Their reward in this society is to survive. Does that sound familiar? To make matters even worse, if they lose the games, their cells get harvested to become Daleks. Yup. This is seen as a kid's show, by the way, just putting it out there. It's very, very light watching on a Saturday night. The Hunger Games is not an all-time series for me like it is for lots of people. I'm not going to be making fan art or buying merchandise anytime soon, but it is a series, or dare I say now a franchise, that I deeply respect. I think it says a lot about the damage that power can do, how oppressive regimes keep going, and how people behave in them, whether they decide to keep their head down so they can survive, or whether they decide to rebel, knowing that it can get them and their entire family killed. It shouldn't be surprising to you, then, that this series has been a target of some book bans. How people can read this and still think that books aren't political, it just baffles the mind. It really does. Anyway, moving swiftly on, let's now turn the video's attention to the prequel Sunrise on the Reaping. I must admit, I do have some quite strong opinions about authors who keep deciding to write in the same world, even when their original series has been there, done that, got the t-shirt. We have a trilogy, we have a complete world. Suzanne Collins is already drowning in royalties. Do we need any more? I understand sometimes there's constraints from publishers badgering authors into writing more, but the point still stands, is it necessary? If I could sum up my review in one sentence, I would say it was interesting, but did we really need it? I don't know. You can help me answer that question if you'd like in the comments. Sure, it's nice to have extra backstory, but sometimes I think it's better to just leave certain things implied or unexplained. Now, this segment of the video does hinge on you being familiar with the original source material, whether that's the books or the films. It doesn't really matter. The kind of picture that you get of this situation is more or less the same. But of course, if you don't want to know anything at all about Sunrise on the Reaping, I would suggest you save this video and come back later when you've finished it. Do leave a like though. I'm a wannabe YouTuber. I am therefore contractually obliged to ask you to do that. I realise I have not yet given you a synopsis for Sunrise on the Reaping, so I'm going to do that now. In this book, we are following Haymitch, who is Katniss and Peter's mentor for the Hunger Games in the books, and we are following his journey through the second quarter quell, i.e. his games. So if you don't know or don't remember, the quarter quell is essentially what happens every 25 years in the games, and they're a little bit different to the other standard renditions. There's a little twist thrown in, a little bit of spice, just something extra to make it a little bit more interesting. Remember, each district has to randomly select, one boy and one girl to represent it in each games. But in the 25th Hunger Games, the first quarter quell, the districts themselves had to choose who was going to represent them, which is awkward. And in this second quarter quell, they have to send double the tributes. Double the execution. I'm now going to get into full spoiler territory, so if you don't want to know anything, please click out the video. This is your final warning. Right, are they gone? This tea's cold. While yes, we do get spoiled for Haymitch's games in the original trilogy, I mean, spoiler alert, he wins. Does that say anything, you know? Like, does that tell us what we need to know? I kind of feel like it does. But there is a fair amount of detail missing, as you would expect for there to be a whole book about it, you know? We know that Haymitch uses the arena against the game makers, since the axe he throws to kill the last tribute rebounds off the side of the arena. We know that he is punished for rebelling against the Capitol. They always punish people. It's the Capitol. I mean, what do you expect? But I thought when I was watching the films and becoming familiar with the original source material again, that surely this is a bit of a low-lying incident to justify killing someone's entire family and girlfriend. Of course, though, things are different to how they seem on the surface. First of all, the very reaping is rigged. There's a bit of a kerfuffle, and one of the tributes gets killed for running away. Haymitch stands up to one of the peacekeepers and gets himself reaped. Of course, the Capitol manages to edit the whole situation and cut this whole sequence out in their typical manipulating sort of way. We can't have anyone think that a rebellion is possible. No, we can't have that, can we? When the tributes actually get to the Capitol, where Snow and all the potential sponsors can get a good look at them, there's a mess up with the chariots, and one of the tributes, Luella, falls out and cracks her head open and dies. Essentially, we find out what happens when a tribute dies before they even get to the games. The Capitol sends out a traitor they've tortured and manipulated to take their place. The main sort of thing that interested me about these particular games is how much meddling in the actual mechanism is planned to take place. We learn that the son of one of the winners, Beatty, who we meet in the original trilogy, has been reaped because of his father's rebellious attitude. They can't kill him because he's a victor. He's one of the few symbols of hope that the districts need to stay in line, basically. Anyway, Beatty visits Haymitch and gives him some intel about the actual construction of the arena. The idea then takes place that Haymitch will work with Beatty's son Ampert to try and disrupt the games and stop them from going ahead. Exactly like what happens 25 years later in the next quarter quell. The fact that there's another pretty strong plot for rebellion, I mean, Beatty is smart. right? He knows what's going on, clearly. Just shows me that this society isn't well constructed. It only appears strong because people believe it to be that way. As Katniss says to President Snow in Catching Fire, it must be a fragile system if it can be brought down by just a few berries. A reference to her games. Plutarch, the game maker, even manages to weasel his way in to give Haymitch advice. I guess setting up the events of future books? Not sure it was necessary though, that's just my personal take. Beatty and Plutarch are far from the only characters that get a mention in this book. There's Effie, YRS and Mags, just to name a few, not to mention the various relatives of District 12 characters that appear in this book. I guess I'm in two minds about this. Sure, it's interesting enough to see how Plutarch ends up being part of the operation in Catching Fire, given his position as a game maker, you know? And I'm sure it's nice for the die-hard fans to see their favourite characters pop up in an earlier installment, but I kind of feel like the whole thing lacks subtlety. If you're reading these books in chronological order, you are going to be spoiled. And although I can't really be in that position now, having read the books, having seen the films with the exception of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I don't really like that idea. I feel like a lot of media these days feels the need to answer every question. And sometimes it ends up being better, if a little dissatisfying, to leave it open-ended. In the long run, I feel like that's just a better effect. That is my opinion though, so take it with a grain of salt. You don't have to agree with it. There's also what I felt were a good few parallels between this book and the original trilogy, which some people may praise for nostalgia purposes or something else, but that sort of thing really did make me question whether this book was necessary. That being said, if you are a real fan of the series, this probably will make you sad. Some people will probably start crying, and we'll get to why in just a second. Throughout this entire book, there's an extended metaphor, dare I say a heavy-handed one, of tributes and inhabitants of the districts in general being like wild animals, with the Hunger Games being their hunting ground, their zoo. This level of dehumanization makes their extermination justified in the eyes of the Capitol. And to be honest, this tactic has been used in our own world multiple times if you pick up a history textbook. I think the most chilling quote that Haymitch says in the films, and I'm paraphrasing here for the sake of continuity, is that no one actually ever wins the games, they merely survive. We can apply this to any victor, but let's take Haymitch here since Sunrise on the Reaping is his book. He's been forced into the arena where the odds are stacked against him. Double the tributes, a training score of 1 out of 12, which is not necessarily going to attract him many sponsors. They tend to prefer lining the pockets of people that actually are tips to win. The Capitol is forcing Haymitch to kill people. He has to watch his ally Maisley die beside him. And then when he gets out of the games, he returns to District 12 to find his home on fire, his family dead inside. Of course it's ruled as an accident. Of course. And then he goes to see his girlfriend, Lenore Dove, who has these gumdrop sweets that she loves. She starts eating them, and Haymitch's heart drops when he notices that they are, in fact, not all different colours like they're supposed to be, but this same shade of red. They're a gift from President Snow. Well, I say gift. A poisoned gift. The way Lenore loses her life here is just so calculated. Snow never needs to go above and beyond to show people how twisted he is. He always seems to know what to do to hurt his target the most. I'm sure people will wonder why he doesn't kill Haymitch at the end. He's shown himself to be a pretty severe rebel, but Snow doesn't kill Haymitch because he doesn't have to. At various points in the book, Haymitch accepts his death. He's not afraid at the prospect of dying. It would almost make him a martyr. Being forced to live, however, without his girlfriend and family, forever an object of the Capitol, making him relive his trauma every single year as he is forced to mentor tributes, is his ultimate punishment. And Snow knows that. He knows what punishment fits what he believes to be the crime. As we get to the end of this video, perhaps think to yourself the next time you read a dystopian novel, are we really that far off from the society depicted in this book? Sometimes the answer will be no. Sometimes the answer will be no for a very long time. but that may not always be the case. So look, despite my prior reservations to the Hunger Games series, I still had a pretty good experience with this book. I got a cold and managed to devour it in around 24 hours. Yes, I know, I'm always ill. But that's all I've got to yap about in this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you will join me in my next video. Goodbye.